I kind of labeled these movies, I think, in previous reviews as like the drive-in era of films because I don't want to just flat out say they're exploitation films, even though technically they are. But you kind of want to distinguish the different eras of exploitation films. Like, for instance, this movie starts off with the producers offer free burial service for anyone who dies of fright. And these type of gimmicks were generally like the mid 50s into the late 60s. By the 70s, the way exploitation movies were kind of packaged were very different, just because films in general kind of change. Uh, Now, I say drive-in, but it doesn't necessarily mean like obviously a lot of these gimmicks don't apply to drive-in, like shock seats and things like that wouldn't necessarily apply to drive-in, but they're kind of that era. I'm not sure what the best way to label them would be, maybe drive-in exploitation. But this is definitely in that realm. Obviously, it's a Corman flick, so you know it's all about the poster, title, and marketing, and not about the actual movie itself. They almost try to get you into the theater with like Taboo or Reverse Psychology.
Whenever I see a movie like this, I always think back to the TV show Leave It to Beaver, which I don't know if you ever watched that show a lot, but I was addicted to that show for many decades in my life. I love that show. And Wally and Beaver, they would always spend their Saturday afternoons at the movies watching the local the new monster movie. And when I see a movie like this is the kind of thing I always think this is what Wally and Beaver watched. You know, it's just a 50s monster movie. That's really all it is. This one's not really a monster movie, but you know, it's in the same realm. Obviously, it's a 50s cheap horror movie, and I liked it.
Mhm. You talked about the poster of the last movie we saw that was kind of in this realm, genre, era, whatever. I think this one it falls right in line, and I love the poster for this movie as well.
Yeah, it's a cover of the DVD box I have. Yeah, it's pretty cool looking. It's maybe not quite as accurate as what you see in the film, but a lot of times
It's
they aren't.
never
But
accurate.
nope. But yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. So the Screaming Skull was actually based on a horror story from 1906, and which the 1906 story was based on folklore, which is kind of interesting because you have Kurosawa did that a lot with a lot of his movies, which are older movies, but they were also based on like Japanese folklore. But when I watched this movie, the only thing I kept thinking about was Rebecca from 1940, the Hitchcock first
Hmm.
American Hitchcock film. Have you seen that movie?
I have not. I'm aware of it, but no, I actually never got around to seeing it.
Yeah. So I'll just give you a brief synopsis of Rebecca. Rebecca falls in love, gets married, moves into her husband's large estate. However, the servants are loyal to the husband's first wife, who died under mysterious circumstances, and one of the servants is obsessed with the first wife. Rebecca is nearly driven into madness by the presence of the first wife haunting her. Now, replace Rebecca with Jenny, and it's the exact same movie.
Yeah, if I hadn't known any better, I'd say you're describing this movie. Clearly, they they stole the plot.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean that kind of detracted from me because I've seen Rebecca a few times. I'm not the biggest Hitchcock fan because his films feel a little too stagey. They don't feel like natural. They almost feel like you're watching like a play. The performances aren't natural. The look of it aren't natural. But they are really good films if you can look past that. So while watching this, I'm just like I'm watching a much lower budget version of Rebecca with like not as much money, not as good actors. So that kind of detracted from me. And it's not like I'm above that. If you like exploitation films, most exploitation films are based on bigger budgeted Hollywood films, and there's just like their version. Like a lot of old exploitation films followed like the Asylum playbook. I don't know if you feel familiar with Asylum films, but they're modern day exploitation movies.
I know of Asylum films. Yeah, I don't honestly know if I've seen any of them, but yeah.
Lucky you. But it's just like if like Avengers will come out, they'll come out with low budgeted versions of those exact same. It's just stuff like that. So I'm not above ripoffs. I enjoy them. But to me, if you're gonna rip a movie off, put your own spin on it. and this was just this exact same type of formula. But what did you think of like the having not seen Rebecca? What did you think of this story?
I like I said, I made a mistake last week. I said I hadn't seen this movie. I actually had seen it, but I remembered very little about it until I started watching again. When I watched it again today, I watched it a lot more closely, and I actually did enjoy it. I accepted it for what it was. I know it's just a silly little horror film, but it goes by so quickly. And it was just, I had fun with it, put it that way. I don't think it was a marvelous film by any means, but to me, it was just a fun watch. And as long as I'm entertained on some level, I'm happy. So at that level, I liked it.
Hmm. I want to talk about Mickey for a little bit. So Mickey, the actor who played Mickey, was actually the director as well, which I thought was interesting. He wasn't getting roles he liked, so he just decided to do his own movie. And to me, if you're going to do your own movie, give yourself a better role than this, if you're actor director. But if you want to enhance your viewing experience, I would say take a shot every time they say the character's name Mickey, because I feel like they said it about 100 times in the first 20 minutes of this movie. And if you
Yeah,
don't
they
drink,
did.
maybe like have a piece of Halloween candy. But if you die of alcohol poisoning or diabetes, don't blame me.
Yeah, no, they did. They did mention him quite a bit. I didn't think about that, but you're right, because there's always a Mickey this, Mickey that. Where's Mickey? Did Mickey do this? Or Mickey, are you telling the truth? Mickey, Mickey, Mickey. Obviously he's supposed to be playing some sort of simpleton here. Maybe that's part of it also, that they speak of him, at least when he's in the room, they got to keep saying his name, Mickey, 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 did you do this? Mickey, did you do that? But yeah, you're right.
Yeah, I almost felt like Samuel L. Jackson in Pulp Fiction. It's like, I dare you, motherfucker! I double dare you. Say Mickey one more goddamn time. But my favorite line in the movie was the husband was talking to the wife.
What's that up there?
Oh, that's where Mickey keeps his gardening things.
Who's Mickey?
The gardener.
It's just like they're just repeating his name, and it's also the redundancy of like everything that's going on. And to me, that kind of summed up at least the first act of the film. I felt like I was watching a movie made by a third grade school teacher for like PBS or something, because like everything was very redundant and repetitive. And it's just like they almost wanted you to like, okay, so this is what's going on, okay? This is who Mickey is. Those are the gardening tools. The gardening tools belongs to Mickey. Who's Mickey? The gardener. It's just like that kind of tone permeated the movie, and it was just infuriating. It's like, I'm not a fucking child. Get along with your story.
Yeah, no, I don't know how to. Well, maybe I missed it, and I hope I didn't. But for me, as I'm watching this film along, and I know I'm going to get a little ahead of myself here, but I was wondering about the motivation of the husband as to why he was doing what he was doing, and it was revealed like in the last 30 seconds of the film why he was doing it. But was it revealed prior to that? If it was, I totally missed it.
I think you're giving the movie too much credit. It was more like the last 10 seconds of the movie.
Why did he do it?
Your money. The question is now, did Marion die in an accident? I suppose we'll never know.
They like quickly went over the plot in the last 10 seconds. I'm like, where was the build up to any of this? Because you're right. The plot twist at the end, spoiler, was that the woman wasn't really crazy. It was the husband. And are you familiar with the term gaslighting?
I do know that phrase, but you'll have to refresh my memory.
Essentially, gaslighting is making someone think they're crazy, making them
Okay.
believe like what's around them isn't true, and playing with the facts in their head. And essentially that's what he was doing, making her
Clearly.
question everything around her, what's real, what's not real, questioning the facts, and driving her insane. And that makes sense that he's gaslighting her if she's rich and if he's trying to get her money. But if you consider the twist at the end, everything that led up to that didn't make sense, because, okay, she's crazy. That's what you want. You want to drive her crazy. You want to send her to a insane asylum so you can have her money. Then why call in the priests to convince her that she's not crazy? That's undoing everything you've been doing throughout the movie. It's like, no, honey, you're not crazy. You know, this is not. There's nothing. There's no ghost. That makes no sense if he's the one planting all this stuff about the ghost. It's like that. It doesn't add up. You know, which is goes into what you're saying. The twist isn't warranted, and there's nothing aside from that explanation at the end that would make you think that he was a bad guy.
Yeah, I was curious about that character, unless they were just trying to pad out the film's running time, which was extremely small as it was, because that priest is brought in. He also explains why or how Marion, the previous wife, died. Um, yeah, I don't know. That seemed to be his only role there. But yeah, you make a point. Why bring him in if he's going to try to derail everything you're doing? And I also question near the end of the film when he does choke his wife. Clearly, I guess she didn't go insane enough, but was he trying to kill her at that point? Because if he did, he failed.
Yeah.
So, and clearly she saw him choke her, so she's going to know that he did this. So I was a little baffled by that too.
Yeah, that even further has the movie make even less sense because if you want to kill her, just kill her. Why do all this stuff with the ghost and the skull? And if you're just gonna flat out kill her, like all that elaborate stuff made no sense. If at the end of the day you're just gonna strangle her to death, just do
Yeah,
that at the beginning and not do all this charade. Because once she's dead, what does all that stuff you did have anything to do with like when the police come in? You know, it just doesn't make any sense. And again, like why gaslight her if you're just going to kill her? Just flat out kill her. And it also seemed like I thought he killed her. I was like, that's an interesting
hmm
twist because this is the first time I saw it. You said you saw it before that you
yeah,
didn't know, but this is the first time I saw it. I was like, okay, he killed her. I didn't expect that. That's kind of interesting. But then she was just alive in the next scene. I'm not sure if you watched what was it? Uh, Saturday morning cartoons like Transformers the movie or GI Joe the movie.
I've watched some. Yeah,
Yeah, well, I mean, those are just a couple of examples, but there are many examples where it's just like the story intends for a character to die, and then at the very end, they'll say, "Oh, by the way, he's alive." Like they did that with a GI Joe character, they did it with a Transformers character, and they've done that with other characters in movies where maybe they'll test screen it for the audience, and it's just like the audience didn't want the character to die, and then at the very end you find out the character didn't die. It kind of felt like that to me with this movie, where I just thought he clearly killed her, and then at the very end, oh, she's alive, and oh, this is the explanation for what happened. I kind of got that vibe from it.
yeah. It seems like they just, I guess, just wanted the happy ending, maybe, and that's the best way to do it. You know, it's not quite so evil and more tame for the kids who were the audience, I'm sure, at that time. That was your target audience were those, your Wally and your Beavers.
Yeah, yeah. There were some things about this movie that I think were executed pretty well. Once you get past that first act where everything is like overly explained and very repetitive, and it almost feel like the filmmakers were talking down to you. Once we got to that stuff with, there was a long sequence with no dialogue, with just her being haunted and with the skull and she's kind of going crazy, and I thought that sequence worked pretty well. It did border between like actually thrilling and scary and silly with the skull, but I think it worked enough, and I thought that sequence was probably the best part of the movie.
Well, the movie itself, I'm trying to think here. Was there a supernatural element involved here? Because, I mean, we see that skull at one point is rolling around on the floor, you know, kind of chasing her. It's chasing the guy, and obviously the funniest scene in the movie I thought was when that skull was just chasing him through the woods or whatever it was, through his front yard there twice or three times in a row, and then starts fighting him. So I'm guessing there was a supernatural element here too. I don't know. Clearly, I guess we're led to believe the husband killed the previous wife. So the previous wife, if there is a supernatural element, is going for revenge here because ultimately the husband ends up dead in the same place the wife did originally. but why terrify the wife? So I'm not sure. I'm not sure if, again, did you think there was a supernatural element also?
Yeah, it almost seemed like they went for the twist and the double twist, where it's just like, oh, the husband was doing it and there's no ghost. Oh, here's another twist. There actually is a ghost and he's gonna kill the husband. It's just, I don't know. I don't know. They clearly had a script, but it felt like either they kept rewriting it or it was just convoluted from the beginning. But you're right. It's just like there is a ghost, there isn't a ghost. I don't know. But yeah, it did seem like at the end they made it clear that there was some supernatural element. But you're right to question the motive. Like, why is the ghost driving the wife crazy? How much of it was the husband driving the wife crazy? Was there actual some supernatural elements to what happened to the wife, or was it everything that happened to the wife was just faked by the husband, and everything that happened to the husband was with the ghost? It's just very convoluted. Um, this is clearly like supposed to be like a gothic type film, which Rebecca was. The one thing that didn't really work for me was the look of the film. It's clear, obviously, it's low budget, American International, Roger Corman. So they're cutting all costs. It really felt like this was just an open house, and they just were able to use it for the weekend because it was
Yeah.
just empty. There was nothing in it. And when you're doing a gothic movie, you need some kind of atmosphere. And it felt like the only prop was the painting of the wife and the skull. And aside from that, it was just like this empty, atmosphere-less, kind of gothic movie. And it just felt a little weird, so.
Yeah, I think that was probably written into the plot because obviously they're trying to say that, I used to live here before, but it's been empty for a while, but now I'm coming back home. And now, so that was the explanation as to why there was nothing there, I guess. But I'm sure that was the case because they were just renting the house for the weekend and it was already for sale and abandoned or just, empty at the time. So they had to find an excuse why there was nothing there.
Yeah, being a zero budget filmmaker myself, yes, 100% yes. You write that into your movie at the beginning so you don't have to explain anything like that. I think I did a movie where it was a knockoff of I Spit on Your Grave. It's called They Almost Die, except it was a white girl moving into a black neighborhood instead of uh, a city girl moving into the back country woods. And she moved into the apartment, but I didn't want to strip my apartment completely bare with all the furniture and everything. So I just wrote it in, oh, she's subletting. And the reason there's all this furniture here is because it's from the previous. You write that into the beginning of your movie so you don't have to deal with that.
Absolutely. You make adjustments as needed.
I read there was a 10-minute version of this movie made in the 70s, which I think would have been great because it would have cut out the fat. And that seemed like a cut I'd be interested in watching. But as you said, this movie as is isn't that long anyway. I wouldn't recommend it for like general movie audiences, but if you like horror films, this is definitely worth watching. I thought the score was pretty good.
Yeah,
it was done by Ernest Gold, who went on to win an Academy Award for another movie. So yeah, overall, I think if you're a horror movie, it's definitely worth watching. What are your final thoughts?
Yeah, again, ultimately, just know what you're getting into. It's just a mindless, silly 50s monster movie. And if you take it on that level, I think you can be entertained by it because to me, it was entertaining. So
They're gone. Rest.